Good morning, colleagues. Bon matin, tout le monde. Good to see everybody. J'espère que vous avez passé un bon lundi. Hope you had a good start to the week. We are meeting at the 120th gathering of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. C'est la 120e réunion. We are continuing, colleagues, as you know, our study on the question of privilege related to cyber attacks targeting members of Parliament. We will have the same format today as we did last week, which is that the first hour will be in public, the second hour will be in camera. We'll have to have a quick couple of minutes to turn over once we hit the end of that hour. Joining us today as our witnesses, nos témoins ce matin are David Vigneault, the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, Peter Madu, the Assistant Director, Requirements, and Beau Bassler, the Director General and Coordinator, Foreign Interference. Mr. Vigneault, you and your colleagues will have up to 10 minutes, jusqu'à 10 minutes, of opening statements, and following that, we will go into our line of questioning. Welcome to our committee. Thank you for being here, Mr. Vigneault. The floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du comité, bonjour. Merci de m'avoir invité à vous rencontrer aujourd'hui.
Monsieur Vigneault, juste un minute.
Oui.
Désolé, we're just having a translation issue.
Yeah, okay. No, it's fine. It's working. Right. Can you start over, Mr. Vigneault? Yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue linked to cyber security, their nexus to national security, and attempts by adversaries to interfere in Canada are becoming even more complex. These issues require the full attention of the government of Canada, or Canadians, in fact. Increasingly, threats to the security of Canada take the form of cyber threats. Malicious cyber activity targeting Canada is growing in scale, complexity, and sophistication, with cyber threat actors seeking to advance their economic, political, security, and ideological interest to the detriment of Canada and its allies. In short, the digital ecosystem has transformed the nature and conduct of warfare, espionage, diplomacy, and trade.
Include those affiliated with foreign states, including militaries and intelligence services, as well as non-state actors. CSIS actively investigates a variety of cyber actors, including from or associated with China, Russia, Iran, and India. Regardless of who is directing their activities, cyber threat actors employ a range of technologies and techniques to exploit weaknesses in information systems, target individuals to gain unauthorized access to systems and networks, or leverage infrastructure in Canada to achieve their broader strategic and geopolitical goals at the detriment of Canada. CSIS is mandated to collect intelligence on threats to the security of Canada, to advise the government on those threats, and when appropriate, take measures to reduce them. This includes threats that emanate from the cyber domain. More specifically, when CSIS identifies national cybersecurity threats, it uses a variety of investigative techniques, including human sources, warranted collection, and other investigative methods to determine the scope, motivations, targets, and source of the threat. Le vaste dialogue instauré par le SCRS.
CSIS engages broadly with industry, academia, governments, and indigenous groups. It helps to strengthen Canadians' alertness and resilience to a growing cyber threat environment. For example, since 2021 alone, over 70 briefings have been provided to parliamentarians on foreign interference and espionage, in which security awareness, including cyber hygiene, was a key discussion point. Additionally, CSIS routinely provides intelligence assessments to our government partners, allowing them to make informed policy and operational decisions. CSIS also shares these assessments and investigative leads with our trusted foreign partners in order to assist them in ensuring the integrity of the global information infrastructure upon which Canadian security relies.
CSIS is part of a community of agencies and departments seeking to protect Canada from cyber threats. While CSIS plays a vital role in the team, it works closely with other key players, such as the cybersecurity experts at the Communication Security Establishment and the Cyber Centre, Public Safety Canada, and the RCMP, just to name a few. Together, we work to safeguard Canada and its assets, information, and national security from an array of cyber threats. Regarding the committee's specific study, our colleagues and cybersecurity experts at the CSE and CCCS joined with CSIS produced a chronology of events detailing the interactions between our organizations and the House of Commons. I will note that CSIS learned of any issues with the House of Commons IT system from CSE in January 2021. Following such, our agency directly briefed the House of Commons IT staff with CSE. From there, we worked with CSE and the House of Commons from January through April 2021 to investigate this activity. This work outlined that IPAC members were targeted, but importantly, it found no instance of compromise on the system nor any follow-on activity. CSIS broadly disseminated intelligence product to clients across the Government of Canada detailing APT31's email tracking attempts at IPAC members in Canada. CSIS worked with the House of Commons, predates the FBI reporting that was shared with both CSIS and CSE on any information that was released to the public by the US in 2024. When this incident was uncovered in early 2021, CSIS followed the protocols in place at the time. CSIS worked directly with CSE and the House of Commons to better understand the incident and its impact. Our investigation alongside CSE's work helped to inform the House of Commons on the specific technical measures that could be taken to mitigate the incident. En 2023, le Premier ministre a...
In 2023, the Prime Minister issued a ministerial directive to CSIS, which outlined and clarified CSIS's role and responsibilities in relation to investigation, notification, and reduction of threats to parliamentarians. The directives outlines that wherever possible within the law, CSIS must ensure that parliamentarians are informed of threats to the security of Canada directed at them. This is uncharted territory for CSIS and is providing an opportunity for reflection, learning, and improvement. What is different today under this directive is that it compels us to have the conversation with our partners on how best to ensure that parliamentarians are informed on the potential threats they face. It may not be CSIS, for example, when we are not lead department responsible for the issue, but because the MD was issued to CSIS, we will lead the discussion on the process to follow.
And I think, Mr. Chair, will skip the recap of the chronology because of time. I will just speak quickly to some legislative authorities. And so I think members of the committee, you will understand that the CSIS mandate is guided by legislation that is nearly 40 years old. In the face of rapid technological change in an increasingly complex cyber ecosystem, gaps in CSIS authorities limiting its ability to detect, investigate, and respond to foreign interference, including by sharing information, has become more pronounced. Bill C-70, which currently sits before the House, proposes a set of focused amendments that will improve CSIS operational response to foreign interference. Amongst these amendments is a proposal to enable information sharing outside the federal government to build resiliency to national security threats, including foreign interference. This will help to build resilience before the threats materialize and will directly enable parliamentarians to make decisions that are more informed. More broadly, Bill C-70 will ensure CSIS investigations are nimble and responsive, resulting in better collection of intelligence and advice, including for parliamentarians. The last thing I would say, Mr. Chair, is that in reflecting on this situation in preparation for this appearance, I think my analysis with my colleagues is that everybody did the work they were supposed to do. However, the outcome for parliamentarians is not what I think everybody will agree now in hindsight is what was desired. And I welcome the work of this committee. I welcome the work that CSIS can do to make sure that in the future we learn from this and that the outcome for parliamentarians and for Canadians is a different one. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Vigneault.
Thank you, Mr. Vigneault.
Opening remarks. Witnesses, we will now go into rounds of questioning. Just for your awareness, there'll be 6 minutes that are allotted to representatives from each political party here today, and then we go into a slightly reduced line of questioning following that. With that, Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Vino, on November 19, 2021, CSIS issued a classified analytical brief to 35 Government of Canada clients on the topic of the Beijing-directed APT-31 cyber attack campaign. Of the 35 Government of Canada clients who received the briefing, did that include the Prime Minister's National Security and Intelligence Advisor?
Mr. Chair, I do not have the specific distribution list, but I can say that, generally speaking, such a product would indeed be distributed to the Privy Council office, and that would include the National Security Intelligence Advisor. That's the general practice, but I will have to double-check on this specific item.
Would that likely include certain ministers, departments, deputy ministers?
Mr. Chair, the way that the distribution of intelligence works is that the departments are responsible to the intelligence unit within departments to then make this information available to their ministers. So it would be hard for me to know.
Maybe the easiest way to go about this is, would you, Mr. Vino, undertake to provide a list of the 35 Government of Canada clients who were briefed to this committee?
I will do that,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. And is there anything you can elaborate on with respect to that briefing?
Mr. Chair, I do not have the specifics of that briefing, but what I can say is that as an intelligence service, working with our partners in Canada, as I mentioned in my remarks, but also working with our international partners, we have seen an increase in the sophistication and aggressive nature of the cyber targeting by China, including by APT-31.
Thank you very much. On August 25th, 2023, CSIS issued a second briefing, a classified intelligence assessment to what in the timeline are described as relevant Government of Canada clients that referenced the ATP-31 cyber attack. Again, would that have included the Prime Minister's National Security and Intelligence Advisor, PCO? Do you know who those relevant clients are?
Mr. Chair, my answer to this question will be the same as my initial one. So I can look into the specific distribution. My assumption is that it would be, but I will confirm with the committee.
Okay, so you will undertake to provide a list of who those relevant Government of Canada clients are. Thank you very much for that. And I would note that August 25th, 2023 was after the ministerial directive, which you alluded to, was issued on May 16th, 2023. So my question is, and maybe before I ask that directive provides that, quote, CSIS will seek to ensure that parliamentarians are informed of threats to the security of Canada directed at them. Why were the parliamentarians not informed pursuant to the ministerial direction?
So, Mr. Chair, I think this goes at the core of the issue. As I mentioned, in the cyber ecosystem, you have different actors with different responsibilities and mandate. We each did our work in collaboration, but also to a certain extent in parallel. And the initial information was not emanating from CSIS, was emanating from our colleagues at CSE. And so we work with them to work with the House of Commons. So the question that the member is asking is if and when would the ministerial directive apply to CSIS? is an interesting one. We are learning how we are adapting this ministerial directive. Mr. Chair, if I could just finish on this,
yes.
I would say that the key point here is that the assessment at the time was that the information had been shared with the House of Commons in order to mitigate that threat.
Well, it hadn't been shared with the members of Parliament, which was the basis upon which the directive had been issued, but nonetheless, CSIS was briefing Government of Canada clients that were deemed relevant, presumably the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, and you had said that although there might be other agencies or departments who may be better suited to brief members of Parliament, but CSIS would have the role of facilitating or leading discussions around arranging such briefings. So did that happen?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that I would say that I would see that the role of CSIS would have been to organize such a briefing. But I think what is clear in hindsight is that the outcome of, for parliamentarians is not what anyone wanted. And so my commitment with to this committee is to learn from this, to work with the committee, learn from the results of your work, and with our partners. And I can tell you that I was talking to my partners at CSE. We all have the same objective, which is to make sure that in the future we have looking and we're going to achieve a different outcome for parliamentarians. And I think this is one of the role. I would say being very candid with you, working with parliamentarians through the House of Commons is something we all need to get better at. We normally go through the House of Commons. I don't want members to think that this is a cop-out by saying, we share the information to the House of Commons and we washed our hands. That was not at all the intent and the approach. However, clearly, for the people who were targeted by APT 31, the outcome was not, the one that people would have expected. And my undertaking to this committee is that, with my colleagues, we will learn from this and make sure with our partners that we are achieving different outcomes in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Madame Fortier pour 6 minutes.
Merci.
For 6 minutes, thank you. I would also want to find out from you how things happened, just to see what kind of experiences we can expect to have if we go through this experience again. To begin, I would say in the calendar, the chronology, it says 18 February 2021, it was decided that the CSIS would work with the House of Commons and the incidents management team for cyber incidents will provide a list of technical questions to assist them in analyzing the suspicious activity. Why was it decided that the CSIS should play an intermediary role between the CSE and the House of Commons? Mr. Chair, my intermediary role, I would ask my colleague to add something. I don't have a specific answer to that. Beyond saying we each have our own relationships with the House of Commons, we work closely with them, the central administration, the regions, we all work with the House of Commons. So I suppose there would have been some connection used at that point. I would ask Mr. Madu to add something. Yes, it's probably because we have had a lot of working relationships with the House of Commons. These were simple issues. The strategic analysis handed over to our colleagues, and the CSIS people do the tactical analysis. In your opinion, who is supposed to inform parliamentarians the attempts of cyber attacks such as this situation that occurred? Well, Chair, at the CSIS, we have a partnership with our colleagues, and we took it for granted that once we worked with the House of Commons, the authorities in the House of Commons, the administration, would discuss matters with the MPs. It seems this approach was deficient for a number of reasons. I know the conditions in which this occurred. It was the COVID period. There were a lot of restrictions in terms of the number of people in their office. This was before we came up with a vaccine. So our intelligence services were working all the time throughout the pandemic. And I think this is a factor that added to the confusion in terms of who should play what role. I think we have to look at this with some humility to find out what to do in the future. It seems that we have too many cooks in the kitchen on this one. So maybe the question is, what is the recipe? Who does what? This is what we should pin down with this cyber threat situation that occurred. Mr. Chair, I think that's indeed the case. When the issues of national security, it ceases. That's in the front lines. In this case, it was a national security issue, but it was detected by our partners from the cyber center. So the analysis was done more at a technical level initially, and we figured that as soon as we informed the House of Commons authorities, that would be the channel through which MPs would be informed. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So the issue of defining who the chef is, we would have to rely on the results of your committee deliberations to see what conclusions you reach. And as an agency, and not only in our specific area of activity, but in the way we work with our partners, we'll make sure that no matter who does the work, the results are there. Do you think it's only one of the three that can discuss with MPs, or do you think maybe in such a situation you might have all three, two of the three should share, do some information sharing to better support the parliamentarians in the long run? Now, Mr. Chair, looking back at 2021, right now we're in 2024, I think there has been some improvements in these issues of security and foreign interference. Our expertise has improved. I don't like to speculate, but I will do it this time. In the future, I would make sure that there is an agency that is specifically responsible. It could be the House of Commons, given their privileged relationships with the House of Commons, but with the CSE and CCs should be in the room. So we make sure that the best information, the best intelligence is shared quickly, and that parliamentarians can have the necessary information, not only to protect themselves, but to be able to make the necessary decisions. And just to end, as far as parliamentarians as such, were you notified that this person wasn't contacted through the right channels? Do you do a follow-up with parliamentarians? Do you think it's important to do these follow-ups, notwithstanding what happened with parliamentarians after the incident? Chair, as I mentioned, I think in this specific case, with this the attempt of APT 31 to attack Parliament, the work wasn't done quite that way. As I said in my opening statement, we will work with our partners to make sure that we all learn from the situation. Thank you, Madame Farcier. Madame Gautreau, 6 minutes, please. I think we've just put our finger on something. In terms of the previous question, there is no agency that takes the lead in making sure that what we went through doesn't happen. So you're talking about speculation, but I think it's vital. And quite often, Chair, Mr. Vignon said, we took it for granted. We supposed that, as far as I'm concerned, that's a vague notion. We should never take anything for granted. So I may be reassured if from now the memos that were sent to the responsible ministers, that there has been systematic follow-up since then. Can you assure me that we won't hear someone was on vacation and it was put in the garbage bin? Just reassure me on that. I can reassure the MP that CSIS has been working in partnership with the Department of Public Safety to make sure that that happens. And the minister was quite clear on that. But ours is a legislative role, and I see there are a lot of obstacles in relation to the law. For us to do our work, we have to find out what you need. You take some time. I'm sure you've thought about these matters. Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening statement, yes, there is a bill before the House currently to modernize some aspects of the CSIS legislation. I hope, in retrospective, this bill was promulgated in 1984 in the midst of the Cold War, following a commission of inquiry that was meant to review some aspects of the organization that was responsible for national security at that time. So this bill, to use my own words, it was kind of a defensive. They were just trying to avoid certain mistakes that could be made in the future. So in that situation in 1984, those circumstances are no longer applicable to 2024. The world has changed. The face of Canada has changed. The nature of the threats we face have changed in terms of the complexity, the number of actors involved in this threat, and the impact on Canadians and Quebecers on a daily basis. So the legislative amendments, Bill C-70, that's before the Parliament today, in terms of information sharing aimed at simplifying our data systems while maintaining all the legal authorities, how to seek mandates from the courts, issues of immunity. That's very important, and I'm sure that would have a very direct impact for Canadians. So I understand Mr. LeBlanc when he said that it's only a start, that there will be other efforts made in the future to modernize this legislation, because once again, it's all about protecting Canadians against these cyber threats. The people behind these threats are mutating fast, and we cannot lag too far behind. I'm somewhat troubled in terms of these delays in the legislative processes. Right now, we're working on C-70, and when we implement it, the question will be, will it still be relevant in resolving the issues we face? I think it's important, it's urgent, there is general agreement on that. Can we more rapidly project or analyze situations? Just to give you the tools. The last situation we see, people are working in silos, the communications are difficult. I said last week, I would like to know, as your client, but I'm not sure if they would be willing to discuss with me. We need to come up with recommendations, because I believe that C-70, as we said, it would be out of date when we start implementing it. What do you think of that? Mr. Chair, I think the MP, Madame Gaudreau, puts her finger on something very important. I think that as a public servant, as an official, I think I can say this. We have to take national security issues, and as far as possible, trying not to politicize these. We must find out how we can quickly and more efficiently come up with modernizations of these different legislations. Because of technological changes, we are very dependent on technological companies. They are constantly changing their protocols. Their working methods are changing in terms of access to data, telecommunications issues. What I would like to see is a parliamentary committee that regularly calls witnesses to hear what we have to say on the data banks and the threat environment, how we can advise. rather than having these omnibus bills that might be too complicated. That's what I would wish. So, Mr. Chair, I think I have 3 seconds left. No? I think your time is up, Mr. Goodrow.
Thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. I think it's been made clear, and you yourself had said it, Mr. Vigneault, the assessment at the time was made, the info was shared. There's that key communication that happens. However, we're constantly learning from a very quickly changing environment. And clearly this is an important matter to have been raised to show that processes do need to change. So I appreciate the work that is continuing to be done and that continues to be done here. I think that is important moving forward, though, to sort of think about those bigger issues now that I know that I'm focused on. I think I'm clear in terms of where we need to go as this committee, but the questions that I have are, I think, in a bigger scope. And I want to talk about the NCCOP report. Now, there was a shocking confirmation that proxies of Modi's government interfered in 2 recent conservative leaderships. Now, this isn't new information. This was reported 2 years ago by the Bureau on a 2022 intelligence assessment by CSIS that stated the government of India agents appear to have interfered in the Conservatives' 2022 leadership race by purchasing memberships for one candidate while undermining another, and also boasted of funding a number of politicians at all levels of government. The same week, Buzz reported that a Conservative member of Parliament had been approached by a government of India proxy to rescind their support for one of the candidates. Can you tell this committee or confirm that the intelligence that was taken by CSIS here was shared with that NCCOP report?
Mr. Chair, first, with all due respect to the member's question, I will not be able to comment on leaked information to the media. But that said, I can assure the member that we have shared and testified to all of the information that was relevant to the committee's review. I will maybe ask Mr. Basler, who is our Coordinator for Interference coordinator, to speak to the volume and the depth of the sharing of our information.
Thank you, Director. Yes, NCCOP certainly had access to any and all service information outside of some which were redacted for cabinet confidences, but any of our classified intelligence was made available to the committee, as well as a number of officials appeared before the committee to be interviewed and answer direct questions throughout their review. They also had all the information that was given to the Independent Special Rapporteur when he was doing his review. The same information has gone to the National Security Review Agency, as well as the Public Inquiry. So there's 4 separate reviews that have had access to, I think, at last count, at least from the service, over 8,000 documents have been shared with the review committees.
Okay. So further, this year, actually, at the beginning of this year, Press Progress reported CSIS was investigating foreign interference in the nomination race for a candidate from Oxford. They cited local Conservative Party officials had been interviewed by CSIS. Local Conservative activists were visited by CSIS officials. So I kind of asked the same questions in that if it was shared with NSCOP, and I understand not wanting to comment on leakages, but the fact that these leaks continue to happen must be concerning. And I don't want to ask about the specifics of that, but overall, when we're talking about these processes and we're talking about leaks and we're talking about improvements, can you talk about that, both the first bit of the question and the second? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would say that in this case, our assessment was that it was investigative journalism as opposed to a leak in this specific story. And so I will obviously not be speaking to the specifics of our investigative techniques or investigative interest. But I think what is very clear is that we have said publicly in our annual reports, in speeches, in appearances in front of this committee and other committee of the House and the Senate, that CSIS has been concerned with foreign interference for many, many years. It's part of our act. we have been investigating this. But what we have seen over the last number of years is an increased aggressiveness by a number of countries. The speed and complexity at which the threat of foreign interference is coming at Canadians, yes, at the democratic processes, elections, but also at Canadians from different diaspora groups who are being interfered with in their democratic rights by foreign nations. This is something that is of grave concern to CSIS, and this is why we have been speaking about this both publicly and privately to the government. And I think Canadians now, through the work of this committee and other committees and the NSI CUP and CIRA and the Commission of Inquiry, are now getting a better sense of what is required. And maybe, Mr. Chair, the last thing I would say is that one of the best tools to address foreign interference is what we're doing right now, which is talk about it in public. Of course, I will not be able to share classified information, but by having more public discussion about these issues in different places with different people, this is how we would increase resilience against these actors. It's not going to be CSIS, or the RCMP or someone else catching people doing it all the time. We hope that we're good at what we do, but it's going to be Canadians in their day-to-day activities who will raise the flag and say, hey, there's something happening here, maybe I should be talking about it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matheson. Colleagues, we now go to the second round. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Turning to the NSICOP report, footnote 63 at page 17 of the report indicates that CSIS briefed the Prime Minister on February 9, 2021 about foreign interference activities by the Beijing regime, more specifically involving efforts to manipulate Canadian media, including, quote, paying to publish media articles without attribution, sponsoring media travel to the PRC, pressuring journalists to withdraw articles, and creating false accounts on social media to spread disinformation, end of quote. Did you brief the Prime Minister on February 9th, 2021? Was it you?
Mr. Chair, I do not have the report in front of me, but I will take the members' word that it's indeed accurate, the reference. I do not remember that specific briefing. I will have to double check if it was myself, someone from my staff, or somebody else who briefed the Prime Minister.
Thank you. And could you undertake as well if the Prime Minister had been briefed prior to February 9th, 2021 on the same subject matter?
Mr. Chair, we'll take that under advisement. We'll try to see how we can do in different committees. We have provided the number of different chronologies, so we'll try to see what we can do.
Page 17 of the NSICOP report goes on to state that the site task force observed during the 2021 election a coordinated campaign aimed at discouraging Canadians, particularly of Chinese heritage, from supporting the Conservative Party. It states, quote, specifically, different Chinese language media outlets in Canada adopted the language of a PRC state media article without specifically attributing it. Most of these media outlets were linked to the PRC via partnership agreements with the Chinese news service, the Chinese Communist Party's primary media entity, end of quote. Through you, Mr. Chair, had a foreign influence registry been in place at the time, those media outlets would have had to publicly register in light of their partnership agreements with the PRC, correct?
Mr. Chair, I'm looking at my colleague here if he wants to opine on this. I would have to defer the question to my colleagues at Public Safety Canada who are devising the current regime. I would not have a definitive answer to provide to this committee.
Well, I would submit the answer would be yes, insofar as it is an arrangement. A partnership agreement would be an arrangement with a foreign entity, correct?
It appears to be, Mr. Chair, it appears to be the case, but again, I would not want to speculate. I'm not the expert on the foreign registry. Our colleagues at Public Safety are.
I don't think we could expand further on the nature and scope of when a partnership agreement would come into force under the current proposed legislation right now. So I think it would be a stretch for me to go that far.
Okay. Well, I realize that you might not be the authority on the subject matter, but if one were to look at the legislation, it's quite clear that that would fall within the definition of an arrangement. And I would just observe that based upon the NSICOP report and other information, including through Global Affairs Canada and the reports of a rapid response mechanism, that it is well documented that during the 2021 election, the Beijing regime ran a disinformation campaign aimed at discouraging Chinese diaspora communities from voting for the Conservatives. You would agree with that?
The Chair, we through the Commission of Inquiry presided by Justice Hogue, we have CSIS in partnership with colleagues made public some summaries of information, including specifically on this information. So I think to be as precise as I can to respecting the member's question, I would refer the committee to that summary, which is the using all of the classified information and the open information and coming up with the best possible story. So I think that would be the definitive story on this matter, Mr. Chair.
15 seconds? Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Garrettson, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of talk going on about foreign interference lately. And I think that you think that's a good thing because, as you said earlier, Canadians need to be aware. Whether it's your work, the Hogue Commission, NSICOP, this issue is out front in public. Is it safe to say that part of the reason why that is because of the work that's ongoing and the elevated importance of that work over the last number of years? Mr. Bingo?
Mr. Chair, that's a very interesting question, and we've been reflecting on this issue. In my view, I think we are CSIS and partners putting more resources and emphasis on this because we have seen the threat increasing in the last number of years. We have seen a number of actors coming at it much more aggressively and doing things that we had not seen before.
So the knowledge is power then. Knowledge is power. Having this information gives us and you and those responsible the power to be able to do something about it.
Indeed, it's the case. That's why I think, while respecting, in our case, the law of Security of Information Act and the partnerships agreement with our partners to protect information, that's why we have now for a number of years been talking publicly about foreign interference. And that's why I do believe that more organized discussion about these issues is what will make Canadians resilient.
So some of the information is public. And can be discussed in the public, but some can't. Some of the reports are classified for various different reasons, but some people can get access to those reports. Obviously, the Prime Minister, members of Cabinet, the leaders of the official leaders of each political party. If they have the information that comes from those classified sources, can they act on it, or are they restricted to act on it because the information's classified?
Mr. Chair, I testified to this issue a few days ago in front of another committee, and my reaction to this is that a couple. One, this is uncharted territory. We had never done it before, so we're all learning together. Second, I think that people with the right security clearance, with the need to know, are indeed able to get briefings on these matters. And third, I think while respecting the law, there are opportunities and abilities for people to make some decisions based on that information without having to reveal it publicly.
So that's what I was getting at. And because it's interesting, because you had made that comment in another committee, and this came up in a CTV exchange on June the 9th, just a couple days ago, where the interviewer said that you had just said that because, and they were talking about the leader of the Conservative Party, said just because your leader is briefed on intelligence does not mean that they can't act on it, which is what you've just said here. And the interviewer went on to say, in fact, it means that he could act on that information. You had last week, when we did an interview, and the interview was with Mr. Chong, that this would not be the case. Mr. Chong then goes on to say that I think they're not correct, referring to you, in saying that. Here's why. The Prime Minister is asking Mr. Poilievre to do essentially to tie his hands behind his back. Here's why. The Prime Minister is asking Mr. Poilievre to go through the Treasury Board Secretariat policy on government security. That's the same process that the individuals on NCCOP have to go through. The process would require Mr. Poilievre to sign an undertaking and swear an oath to secrecy not to divulge the information to anyone else, and therefore not be able to tell anyone else to act on the information to hold individuals accountable. The host of the show then said, respectfully, am I supposed to believe you over the director of CSIS, referring to Mr. Chong, to which Mr. Chong replied, yes, you are. So I'm not going to ask you to comment on that because I know you're not going to want to weigh into this, but you have made it very clear today that if you do receive information, even if it is classified information, you can use that information to make decisions, even if it means you're not allowed to reveal that information. That is correct?
Mr. Chair, that is my understanding. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Chong and his remark. I would welcome a discussion with him to maybe have a chance to better understand his point of view.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Gerritsen. Madame Gaudreau, 2 minutes 30 secondes à vous.
Let's come back to your wish. And I was trying to imagine a parliamentary committee that that doesn't have too much power, but enough to get away from partisanship. And then we learned that there are leaks in newspapers. I would like to hear you go a little more in depth on that. Mr. Chair, when I was thinking about the MP's question, I had in mind different models. We have partners in Australia that they have that over a period of a few years, they have a government agency that reviews all the arrangements and the legislation governing national security to make sure that the threat situation and these famous toolbox, that the right instruments be in there, that everything is modernized. And this commission has been set up to come up with reports outside of elections periods to avoid certain complications. So that's one model that exists. But as I have said several times over the past few years, Canada has been lucky that some of the threats we have faced, they were different compared to others. Our geography, 3 oceans, a partner such as the United States, as an economic partner, a military partner, we were able to avoid the intensity of threats that other countries faced. So Canadians, and rightly so, I'm pleased with that, we don't have to look at these matters along the same lines with the same intensity. But the world is changing, and everything that has made Canada a prosperous and sovereign country, we have to recognize that we are going the wrong direction. And I think that finding a different way to discuss these matters, including in Parliament, we must develop a new approach. So I would like to summarize what I heard you were saying. We should work with the models of the 5 Eyes and try to come up with our own model to face these threats. Thank you, Madame Gaudreau.
Thank you. So just following up on Mr. Gerritsen's question, the Prime Minister has had the full unredacted NSCOP report for 11 weeks now?
Mr. Chair, I would take the word of the MP, but for a period of time, for sure.
With no actions? Okay. Just double checking. Given, I would like to give notice of a motion, Mr. Chair, in the time that I have. It's just notice, and we'll be sending it around shortly. However, given the recent findings of the NSCOP Special Report on Foreign Interference in Canada's democratic processes and institutions, the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs order the production of all relevant memoranda, briefing notes, emails, records of conversations, and any other relevant documents from departments and agencies, including the Canadian Security, Intelligence Service and Communications Security Establishment Canada, concerning interactions with Conservative Party of Canada officials and representatives on the topic of foreign interference and its impact on the outcome of the 2020 and 2022 leadership races, provided that, one, both agencies tasked with gathering these documents apply redactions according to the Access to Information and Privacy Act, and two, these redacted documents be deposited as soon as possible, but not later than Sunday, June 25th, 2024, with the clerk of the committee to be distributed to all members of the committee in both official languages. Noted?
We've got it. I understand you're not choosing to move that motion, Ms. Matheson, so there remains...
Giving notice, I have to...
Yeah, absolutely. So there remains 45 seconds in your questioning if you'd like it.
Actually, I wouldn't mind building off of what Madame Goudreau was asking. So when I was in Taiwan on a trip, there was a great deal of discussion, of course, about what they face in terms of bombardment, foreign interference, and the education that they move forward with of their own public. Have there been workings with the government of Taiwan to learn from that, to educate its own public, even the idea of a minister of digital affairs, as they have?
Mr. Chair, very quickly, I would not comment specifically on the interactions of CSIS with partners, but I can reassure the member that there has been indeed a number of partners in Canadian government who have engaged specifically on these issues with the partners in Taiwan.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Matheson. Monsieur Berthold, 5 minutes à vous.
Mr. Berthold, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. To start, I would like to say it's quite ironical that we have the NDP jumping to the defense of the government, whereas we've come out with document production motions. We've been doing this for weeks. And each time the NDP voted in favor of the government to prevent this document production. So I think it's somewhat ironical to see the motion presented today by our colleague from the NDP. Mr. Vigneault, you said in your statement that it was very important not to politicize these national security issues. I have to come back to this. We must point out that politicizing national security issues is not just talking about it. It's not the opposition should talk about it, ask hard questions. It's trying to use this intelligence for partisan interests. Is that what you think when you say politicizing national security issues? Mr. Chair, yes, to a large extent, that's exactly what I mean. Once again, with my duty of reserve, I think when there are partisan interests that are taken into account, that's normal in a democracy, and we're all happy to be living in a democracy, but sometimes some of the basic issues are set aside, and from my personal view as director, it makes things more complicated in a politicized atmosphere. So if as a government I refuse to see classified information, I don't want to place myself in an embarrassing situation. I refuse to act when we have information on a candidate that might have received support from a hostile foreign power, putting the blame on another association or simply not taking the responsibility. So it's in some ways politicizing the debate on national security. Mr. Chair, I don't think anyone would be surprised if I say I cannot provide specific comments of the nature that the MP made. But what I can say is the discussion that's ongoing and the work of this committee, once again, I think it's very important for Canadians to come up with ways of protecting ourselves from foreign interference and the other threats. Well, sorry, Mr. Vigneault, I have to focus more on this. The political debate around these issues we're currently discussing, are not limited to just the use in the committee or following certain leaks, decisions that are based on partisan interests. I think that's obvious that it does have an impact on national security. Well, I prefer not to comment on that, but I do understand your question. Mr. Vigneault, who in the entire system can decide to declassify information that is deemed confidential or top secret? Who should decide that a piece of information that yesterday was secret is now been disclosed publicly? Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer. We don't have a declassification policy. If I take our service as an example, the information flowing from the service is regulated on the Information Secrets Act and our policies. There is no government policy as such, authorities that can order such declassifications. But in cases of a severe threat to national security, the Prime Minister can use the information and make it public. Generally, in my experience, it's done in close collaboration with the agencies. A concrete example would be the first time we mentioned certain countries that were involved with there was classified information. We did some work to be able to see now with public knowledge the impact on our operations. Maybe we can reveal a little more. It's an iterative process, but it's not really based on a government policy. I don't have too much time, but it is indeed a directive from the Prime Minister that allowed you to disclose information to the MPs that were targeted by foreign interference and to disclose this information that was previously not available to the MPs. Specifically, we use Section 12 authorities on the CSIS Act on attenuating threats. So it's based on the CSIS Act. There's a process within that allowed me to have some preliminary discussions with Mr. Chung. Unfortunately, Mr. Berthaud, that's all the time we have.
5 minutes à vous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here. Mr. Vigneault, you mentioned that your team has met with over 70 MPs to brief them in the past couple of years. Is that correct? Or over 70?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it is correct, but I do believe that we also, 70 parliamentarians, and I think Canadians, we're talking about, about more than 1,000 people we have engaged with.
Could you confirm that the members, the parliamentarians who were victims of this cyber attack have all been met with? Can you confirm that?
Mr. Chair, I'll have to go back and review that information specifically.
Could you undertake to do that? Because the directive of May 2023 was clear that all parliamentarians who are targets are to be made aware. So I would like to make sure that all parliamentarians, and we have some who will be coming to as witnesses on Thursday, and we will be asking them if they've been met with by CSIS to be briefed.
Mr. Chair, I will undertake to confirm if the MPs were met. However, I think it's very clear as well in my testimony and what has been presented to this committee that, there was as I said, the expectation when we were sharing the information is that the specific information would be shared by the House of Commons, and that also the directive, the ministerial directive issued to CSIS came about 2 years later than the incident. So I think it's important to keep these two points in mind in reflecting about what has been done here.
But Mr. Vigneault, you've had 2 years to be able to brief. You've had over a year since 2023, the directive, to get in contact with these members and senators who were affected. And when I'm looking at what I'm hearing, what we've been hearing during this study, is almost like a Shaggy song. It wasn't me. I've got the House of Commons saying, no, it wasn't us. I've got our, CSE saying, no, it's not us. We have CSIS saying it's not us. But in the meantime, parliamentarians, both the Senate and the House of Commons, are sitting here targets. So there seems to be a real breakdown, and no one wants to take responsibility to make sure that the parliamentarians, the very people that you say are targets of foreign interference, are not actually being briefed. So this is a very big concern of ours, and I understand you want to learn from it. But in the meantime, our adversaries who are doing this are getting away with it. So my question is, what structure needs to be put in place to ensure that the very people who are being targeted by, whether it be state actors or non-state actors, are making sure that there is a constant dialogue between the two, because maybe I have information that you don't have. And there seems to be that is missing. And when we say it's the House of Commons was responsible for letting know the parliamentarians, what about the House, what about the Senate? So is the House of Commons IT responsible for the Senate as well? So there seems to be it's not my problem, or it's not I did my part of the, assembly line, but at the end of the day, it's not getting done. So what do we need to do to get it done?
So, Mr. Chair, I think I've, in my remarks and in my previous comments, I've been clear that the outcome that we have seen here is not the one that members of parliament or senators in the IPAC would have wanted. It's definitely not the outcome that we would have wanted, because our work on national security is to make sure that, we are enabling people to be able to defend themselves and do our work. And so the undertaking I've made to this committee is to myself, with my partners, with at CSIS, with CSC, with the House of Commons and the Senate, we learn from this and look at how we are aligning the different authorities, because we also have to respect the mandates and laws that govern our actions. How do we combine these to make sure that the outcome is different in the future? And so I am very sincere, Mr. Chair, when I've made that offer before, and I think it's probably the best so I can provide to the member.
So I have no more time, so I'll ask more questions in the in-camera session. Thank you. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Romanado. Colleagues, we are going to suspend.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question of my committee colleagues before we do this?
Is this a point of order, Mr.
Well,
Calkins?
so I guess what I'd like to know is what the rationale and purpose is for moving in camera. The director has basically said that we want to have a public conversation with this.
Mr. Calkins, sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to suspend. We can discuss this while suspended briefly. We do have an agreement from the committee to be in camera. It's very unconventional for us to be discussing changing that practice. We can of course have a motion put forward should that be desirable to change our setting. But I'm going to suspend briefly so that we can talk as colleagues. Okay, so I'm going to suspend briefly so that we can talk as colleagues, and then we're going to decide what colleagues want to do. Okay, so we're going to suspend briefly here.
you.